Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we're going to be going over the Slormancer build I've been playing over the past few days. So recently, this patch introduced another Ancestral Legacy Stone. That means that we were able to stretch all the way out to the outer edge of the Ancestral Legacy tree, which means we have a lot more options than we used to have. This meant that, of course, they had to implement the rest of the Ancestral Legacy tree. So the first node that caught my attention was Lowey's creation. So I decided to start leveling a mage, and eventually when I got done with the campaign, I tested Lowey's creation. It is a minion that is an aura. It can't be silenced. It can't be damaged. It has a set attack speed, so like its attack is quote unquote a channel ability. So that means that like attack speed does not affect how fast it hits, and it shoots out in like a little bit of an AoE, and it has a pretty decent AoE. Now, one of the biggest problems with this thing is like, I'm going to be honest, there's no way to making this actually work all by itself. Even with all the scaling in the world, all the AoE scaling, everything at your disposal, there's no way of making it hit large enough area to actually be a competitive build. Now, what it lacks in area of effect, it has in damage scaling. This scales off of elemental percentage damage, elemental flat damage, aura effect, and minion percentage damage, while also scaling off your crit and crit multi. So that means that you can scale this thing to the moon, essentially. You can keep scaling it, and just kind of like how I have, except just more and more and more. And right now, my arcane breaches are doing like about 200k per hit when everything's set up, while my Lowey's creation is hitting for well over 1,000,000 per crit when everything's set up, which is really fantastic. It crits 3 times per second on average, like it hits 3 times per second. I have about a 60% crit chance. That'll get better as I reinforce, obviously. And overall, the minion is kind of cool. The only problem, like I said, is its AoE is a little lacking. This has led me to getting up to like Wrath 8 in the forge with all doors opened. If I wanted to do slower forges, I could probably do Wrath 10. If I really wanted to do like a 2-door, two-door forge and stuff like that, but I don't really think that's worth it. So I ended up just doing, 6 doors at Wrath 8. Other things about the build, we're scaling a lot of flat elemental damage through scaling mana. We have Ferocious Affinity, which gives us a bunch of elemental damage based on 15% of our mana. We also have, of course, the thing that I think our current Ascendancy has, where it gives us 25% of our missing mana as elemental damage. And eventually, when we get the last 2 Ancestral Legacy Stones, there's also another node on the tree that allows us to get even more damage based on, I think, like 60% of our locked mana, which is going to be our entire mana bar eventually. So that means that we can essentially scale our elemental damage again after we get one more Ancestral Legacy keystone. I can't reach it right now, but like once we get the extra ones, we'll be fine. So this will be doing about like probably double or triple the amount of damage it's doing right now, because that node is very impactful in these kind of setups where you're just trying to stack as much mana as possible and get rid of it. Overall, I've been enjoying the build. One new thing that I've been able to, implement into the build is the fact that I have a very small investment into elemental res and, of course, armor, and it still feels really good now. Now that like elemental res and armor actually functions, it's actually pretty good to invest a small amount into the numbers. Right now I have like 4k of each, and to be honest, that feels pretty good on top of all of my other damage reduction. Most of the defenses of this build is the 20% mom that's on my cloak. I also have the ultimatum with area damage reduction. That's pretty mandatory in a lot of builds these days, especially if you're not stacking armor and LE res. And we're just stacking as much HP as possible. Overall, I've enjoyed the build. I don't think it's the best build at all. There are other builds that are much better, significantly better. It was just nice to play around with Lowey's creation because I thought it was a cool idea for a build. So we're going to go in game and talk about it more in depth. If you want more videos like this, I'd heavily suggest leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, as that's the best way of notifying me that you want to see more Slormancer content like this. So let's go in game, shall we? With the character, first thing we're going to look at is the ancestral legacy tree, because that is the most important thing to Lowey's creation here. Lowey's creation is very interesting. It scales off of aura effect, minion damage, area of effect, elemental damage. So on my gear here, I have a bunch of increased aura effect. I have a bunch of increased minion damage. I also have a bunch of increased elemental damage as well, and a bunch of flat elemental damage from my scaling. So this allows Lowey to scale to the moon. He's also, a reservation aura, which is perfect for the setup that we're currently doing with Ferocious Affinity. Now, one of the biggest problems, though, currently is the fact that we cannot reach this node, Elemental Lock. This is an absolute staggering amount of flat damage. So right now, it would be 42,000 flat damage that we're missing. So to compare that with what else I have, we have, where is it? This node, which is only giving us 20,000. And this is giving us most of our damage. So getting access to the final, so if you don't know, there's going to be another Ancestral Legacy Stone that's kind of like a stone that goes anywhere. Or of course, an extra stone so we can like path over here. And that will allow us to essentially just be able to grab this. And this is, like I said, a lot of extra damage that we're currently missing because we kind of have to do a kind of a shoot. We have to like shoot all the way up here to get there. Everything else on the way isn't really that important. It's really cool that this is an aura as well, as it locks and gives us extra increased damage, which is cool. But other than that, everything else is like whatever on the Ancestral Legacy tree. Now let's talk about skills. So sadly, due to the nature of this build, since, Mr. Elemental can't handle everything because he only does so much area and so much damage, we are actually utilizing Arcane Breaches. Why are we using Arcane Breaches? Well, it's for mainly two purposes. The first purpose is for the increased max mana, right, per enemy. This can easily double or triple our mana while we're in the Forge. This is a very strong node while you're in the Forge, as of course, the more mana we get, the more damage we deal. And we're also running Gravitational Force. The whole point of using Arcane Breach in the first place was to allow us to use Gravitational Force, bring enemies together so that Lowey's creation could kill them easier. And instead, what happened was Arcane Breach ended up just being my clear, and Lowey's creation ended up being my single target, which is, whatever. It's not really efficient, but it was just what I've been messing around with. And for Ray of Obliteration, we only need it for a few reasons, mainly for this heavy increased armor and Ellie res. This is insane, on top of turning it into a clone. So whenever it's just a clone and it's just shooting, it's giving us all that increased armor and Ellie res, right? And we also have a legendary that allows us to make enemies take increased elemental damage, which is really good on bosses and stuff like the Siege Leader and elites and stuff like that, which is cool. So both those combined is a great support package for Lowey's Elemental. Then for our last tree, mainly our Devoted Scholar tree, just getting a lot of mana, getting some movement speed from moving through the Wall of Omens. These are really strong in the Forge because deleting projectiles is really strong when you're trying to defend certain things. This tier doesn't really have anything. This one is a lot of your damage right now. It's the main reason we are Devoted Scholar. Eventually, like I said, once we get that one mana lock node, will be great. This side doesn't really give you anything. This is the one I was talking about. The enemy projectiles are destroyed. Just some elemental res because we don't really care about any of this. And then we don't really care about any of this either. We're mainly here just for this node, the Slow Awakening here. Now, eventually, once you get that mana lock node, what you can do is you can swap off Devoted Scholar, swap to Arcane Commander. Arcane Commander allows you to get a bunch of armor scaling based on our max mana and this would be doubled, like I said, with our Ray of Obliteration. This would be insane, and that on top of Arcane Pact would allow us to just simply tank through everything, because we have infinite mana, so like having 45% of mana, damage taken as mana instead of life would be really strong, thanks to the fact we have it on our cape as well. So all of that combined would be the way I would take this build in the future once we get access to this node, like I said. So overall, that's it for the skill trees. For the attributes, mainly you just want like a bunch of damage reduction, because since you're scaling life instead of like the armor and Elirez, you just want as much damage reduction. Here, I wanted to get up to the melee damage reduction, but sadly we don't have enough points yet until we get to level 100. And we mainly want just extra elemental res multiplier from this. This combined with this allows us to scale enough Elirez to the point where like we're not feeling like a potato. It's a lot better when we have our Ray of Obliteration shooting and all our multipliers are working and all that. Now, for our gearing of, like I said, Primordial Staff, Ferocious Affinity, giving us a bunch of mana, which is then scaled, giving us a bunch of extra elemental damage. I'm not entirely sure once we get the mana lock, we don't necessarily need this. We could swap to a different Storm Reaper, but the problem is like, it gives us such a large amount of flat mana and percent mana, and it works with everything else we're doing. We might as well keep it. We're just running Astorius with Rune of the Nimble Warrior for the crit chance and extra effect as well, which is cool because this will go up to like 30% extra crit chance. And in a forge, that will bring us all the way up to like 80% crit chance, which pretty much is plenty for our purposes. Eventually, like I said, with upgrades, you could upgrade these runes and make them much better. Now for the gearing here. For the helmet, we just want that max mana multiplier. We want the life, mana, and mini increased damage, area increased size, you know, the usual. One thing about this build, I'm not entirely sure. I wasn't able to test it, but I was told by the Slormancer Discord that Elemental Pen would work on our Elemental. I'm not entirely sure if it does or not, but I've just slapped Elemental Pen on every single piece of gear that I have that I could, and hoping that it works. Sadly, I don't really have much info on this. I can't test it in a, you know, a way that would be easy for me right now. So I'm not entirely sure, but it is only one stat, so it's whatever. Like I said, our amulet, crit chance, area, aura, life, mana, our chest, same thing. I was still rolling the magic stat on that. I forgot to re-roll that. And the black cape, we're still re-rolling that epic stat, but mainly we really care about the damage dealt to your mana instead of life. This on top of eventually Arcane Commander will make us almost immortal, which is cool. Even more damage on our belt, damage on our rings, like damage in life, like, you know, you can get the picture of what we're scaling with everything. Like I said, one of the best things about this build is the fact that aura effect works on it. Now, this is really cool for a number of reasons. First things off, eventually when we get enough stones, we could actually, so we could use our one free notable, right, to grab Lowey's creation, I think, and then maybe grab elemental aura, but then save us like 2 points. And then we can grab something like air conditioner. This would give us like, I'm pretty sure it would give nearby enemies negative 200%, 270% negative attack speed multiplier, which is a lot. It's a lot. This would make it so that enemies don't really get a chance to attack. And that would mean that we could move to like a belt of extripable torment, which is a unique belt. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I don't have it, but it's a unique belt that makes it so enemies have increased attack speed, but deal less damage to us. Well, the air conditioner would be reducing their attack speed so far that we could just run the belt of extricable torment and just get a bunch of free DR for free, right? But yeah, that's pretty much it for the character. I'm pretty sure I went through everything. If you have any questions, leave them down below. I also have a Discord.